Welcome to the Darkstream. Vox Day, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. Thanks for tuning in. Haven't been streaming much lately. It's been a rough last couple of weeks, unfortunately, but we got through them. We survive. We thrive. Even if there's the occasional step back, we just know it's preparing for 2 steps forward. If my voice sounds a little bit off like it has for the past about 2 months, turns out I've got bronchitis. I'm fine. In fact, my doctor was saying, you must be taking good care of yourself because like everything's completely fine. It's just that, you know, you need some antibiotics. You could have come in a month ago. But yeah, so I've been playing full soccer games and stuff, despite having less than full lung capacity and all that. So I guess that's a good sign. You know, should be able to elevate the level a bit when I'm actually 100%. As I alluded to on Social Galactic, we had a pretty bad situation 2 days ago. There was a pretty significant car accident, but everyone's good, family's good, and so, you know, thanks to everybody who prays regularly for the family, because you know, I'm convinced that that's why everybody's just fine. You know, everybody's okay. The mic volume isn't low. That's my voice. I've actually got the mic volume up. I think actually the mic is cranked. So apologies if I'm a little bit harder to understand. This is obviously not going to be a particularly long stream. But, you know, even though we're having suffering some setbacks like we did with some of the machines, some of the new machines at the bindery, the US bindery is making it obvious why we need to have our own bindery, because we still don't have a date for when War and Peace is being bound, even though they've had this stuff for weeks. But, you know, we're getting there. In the meantime, we're using the time wisely. You've probably noticed that ArcTunes has had a bit of a revival, so that's doing well. We're actually not at, but approaching some of our record traffic there, so that's good. And we're going to see Razorfist is going to have his stuff on ArcTunes soon. Ghost of the Badlands Color will be out soon. Something Big is out soon. These things are all done. We're just proofing them before we ship them out. So hopefully we'll get Alt Hero Q out to you guys soon as well. But what I wanted to talk about tonight is the belated but growing awareness that production capacity matters in global war. Now, this would seem to be an obvious truism. This would seem to be something that anyone who had any responsibility whatsoever or even interest in warfare would know. But the reality is they don't. They haven't paid any attention to that kind of stuff. Here's some interesting facts. In 1948, with an output of 1.3 million tons, Britain produced 51% of the world output of shipping. Britannia ruled the waves for 200 years or more, and it was because they had better shipbuilding capacity than anybody else. Spain was probably making more ships at the height of the gold era when they were importing gold from the New World. But in general, England had its empire because it produced the majority of the world's ships. Then around 1950, the U.S. replaced Britain, and it was running number one. I have some statistics. In 1975, the U.S. shipbuilding industry was ranked number one in terms of global capacity. They don't measure it in terms of tons, but they said with more than 70 commercial ships on order for production domestically. Nearly 50 years later, in 2024, the U.S. produces less than 1% of the world's commercial vessels. In fact, it produces only 73,000 tons. In the first 5 months of this year alone, China's shipbuilding output reached 16.5 million tons, up 15% year on year. They're currently accounting for 48% of the global total. So what that means is that China is now as dominant as Britain was when it was the greatest empire on earth. That's now. And Japan and Korea are numbers 2 and 3, and even together, they don't quite match up to the Chinese shipbuilding capacity. And so what that means is that World War III, if it's fought, if it actually goes hot, it's not going to last very long. And the U.S. is not going to win it. The West is not going to win it. NATO is not going to win it. Colonel McGregor, there's a post on the blog today, Colonel McGregor responding to RFK Jr., and both of them are pointing out that despite the fact that the NATO leaders are meeting in Washington, it's very obvious that they can't do anything about Ukraine and Russia. They can make all the noise they want. They can make all the threats that they want. And they can even, if they wish to, put an army of about 500,000 or so into Ukraine. And if they do so, they will lose. Maybe not quickly, maybe not overnight. But the reality, as McGregor has pointed out, is that they're not going to get across the ocean. During World War II, it was the Allies, it was the U.S. and the UK were the two largest manufacturers of ships. They owned the waves. Yes, the U-boats of the Kriegsmarine did manage to challenge them. They managed to challenge Britain alone. But once the U.S. got involved, it was over. Despite all the German innovation, despite all the new tricks and tactics, of the U-boats and the wolf packs and so forth, it was over. And that's exactly what the U.S. is facing. I mean, the situation in World War III is almost completely the inverse of World War II. Then as now, Russia / the Soviet Union remains the dominant land power. But now the US and the UK are on the other side. And interestingly enough, the US and the UK and Germany and Italy, all of the Axis and the allies together can't match up with Russia. Now, if you bring Japan into it, that's a little bit more formidable. But the problem is that Russia counters that with China and with India and with Iran. And so, there's absolutely no chance, absolutely no hope whatsoever that NATO can win. But the important thing to understand is that the fact that NATO can't win doesn't mean that they won't go to war anyhow. Because they don't really care that much about winning a war per se, because they're not the ones who are going to be fighting and dying. They want to destroy Christendom. That means they want to destroy Christianity and Christians. They want to destroy the European peoples, and they want to destroy the Greco-Roman philosophic and legal legacy. And they've made pretty good headway in destroying all three, haven't they? Mostly because nobody's fought. Nobody's even tried to stop them. And that's the fundamental problem that we're facing. Clown World is desperate. Clown World is now backed into a corner. Russia and China know that they can comprehensively defeat Clown World if they wish. Of course, because they're more civilized, they're trying to figure out how to win the war with a minimum of cost to their own sovereign nations. That's what good leaders do. That's what leaders who care about their people do. Russia has seen probably the biggest increase in the standard of living in terms of per capita wealth, life expectancy, etc., and so forth, in the last 20 years. So the Russian leaders don't want to sacrifice that. Obviously, the Chinese explosion in terms of quality of life and life expectancy, that was, previous. That happened more in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But the point is that they're not decadent, degraded, invaded, demoralized nations. They're nations on the rise, and there's not a single genuinely free nation in the West. All the stuff that they've talked to us about, the democracies, the arsenal of democracy, the innovation that the free society provides, all those things are lies. I mean, it's really kind of comical to see how fundamentally, these guys have been smoking their own supply for some time. It's really rather remarkable when you think about it. I'm going to read you something here that I noted that I thought was a little bit remarkable. There's a U.S. senator talking. The West is stunned by the weakness of its military industry. Senator Jim Risch, Republican from Idaho, has said, the Ukraine conflict demands much more money. It's not money. Money's not the problem. They have plenty of money. They can print all the money they want. But what are you going to buy with it? You can't buy military goods from factories that don't exist. He was actually speaking at the NATO event that RFK Jr. was referring to. I think all of us have been stunned by the weakness and the holes in our industrial production when it comes to defense. Well, I'm not. I'm pretty sure that neither Putin nor Xi are surprised in the slightest. I think they were counting on it. What's interesting here too is the U.S. Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks said, "Production matters. Production is deterrence." She argued that Western countries can quickly build arsenals of democracy since their political systems supposedly foster innovation and transnational cooperation, while those of autocracies such as Russia or China do not. Well, that may have been true some time ago. That may have been true back before diversity and inclusivity and equality and all of those things that have fundamentally changed the U.S. manufacturing force from what it used to be back in 1940 to what it is now in 2024, which is largely non-existent, highly diverse, very bureaucratic, and totally politicized. I mean, I'm a good designer. I'm a good technology designer. My dad was, practically famous in the defense industry for some of the stuff that he designed for Honeywell. He worked on a number of big name missiles. When I was a kid, when I was like 5 or 6 years old, I remember going in on the weekends with him, and I would play a game where I was, reading the dot matrix printer, trying to spot the tank. It was a guidance system for a anti-tank missile. He also worked on the Blackbird, that super fast spy plane. I wouldn't be permitted to work at a defense contractor now because they don't like my politics. My dad wouldn't either. Now, you might not care. You might say, hey, certainly Shaniqua Jones and Enrique Gonzalez are just as capable as Vox and his dad. Maybe they are. I guess we're going to find out. But I wouldn't bet on it. I really wouldn't bet on it. So, so there's no chance that they're going to win, but that doesn't mean they're not insane enough and wicked enough to decide to do it. So that's something to pay close attention to. And that's also why you should be actively discouraging any of your kids, male or female, from serving in any of the Western militaries. Because if you thought it was bad when people were being sent to fight fourth-rate militaries in the desert for oil, you really don't want them being sent to fight first-rate militaries for Clown World. That's just a complete and comprehensive non-starter. So I think it's good that they are beginning to understand the limitations, because hopefully that means saner and more sober voices will prevail. The neocons, the Kagans, the Donald Rumsfelds, the sort of crowd that has driven the bus of U.S. belligerency for the last 20 years, they have no capacity for understanding war on the scale that it involves. They still think that, their whole plan revolves around, well, we'll win a battle and then Putin will lose power, despite the fact that that has almost never ever happened, and it completely contradicts their claim that Russia is an autocracy and he's a totalitarian dictator. If you're a totalitarian dictator, public opinion doesn't matter very much. and the reality is that both Putin and Xi quite rightly enjoy the confidence of their people. Everybody thought that Russia was going to be worse off than it's proven to be. I expected the Russian military success. I've said that for years. But I did not anticipate the complete success of Russia in dealing with the massive sanction regime imposed by the US and the EU. I thought they'd survive it, but I didn't realize that they would thrive the way they have. And so, anyhow, that's all I've got for tonight, but thanks for tuning in. And I am planning to do that Taiwan analysis next week. Obviously, that's where I've got some of these numbers from. So tune in. Also, if you haven't checked out ArcTunes yet, Silenciosa is running. Midnight's War Night Streets is running. Hypergamos is back. So it's all good. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.